Few things are for sure in this life, but this is. If we live for any substantial amount of time, we will encounter grief due to the loss of a loved one. Not something any of us ever want, and we all handle it differently. This podcast is to feature those who have done purposeful and meaningful things through their grief. These people featured on here are normal folks, just like you and me, who were thrust into a place they never wanted to be in their lives. A painful place. As they move through their pain, they realize that something worthwhile, something for the greater good could come out of the unthinkable. I'm sure that none of them would ever consider themselves to be a hero, but when I searched the definition of the word hero, I found this. A person who is admired or idolized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And that fit. And so it's my privilege to bring you the remarkable stories of these heroes in grief. Hi, everyone. This is Tom, your host for the Heroes in Grief podcast, and the response has been incredible so far, and I want to thank you for that. It's getting out to people, and they're letting us know that it's helping them, and that is what it's all about. I want to make you aware of a way that you can support this podcast without having to spend 1 cent, and that is through affiliate marketing. I've set up affiliate marketing for online shopping. If you do online shopping, then I have links to all the major retailers, most of them anyways, and I can provide them for you so that when you buy online through those links, you'll help support the podcast through the percentages that we get. It doesn't cost you anything more. You just shop like you regularly would on the sites that you love. It's very easy. All you have to do is shop. And that's it. Just let me know the links to the places that you want to shop at, and I will provide the affiliate links so that you can do it. If you want more information on this, you can go to heroesingrief.com. It takes you to the Linktree page where a video explains it in a little more detail. But you can always email me at tom@heroesingrief.com, and I can answer questions for you. But you can support the podcast that way, and it's very easy, very simple, and it doesn't cost you a cent. Isn't that great? Thank you. Now here's today's episode. Welcome to the Heroes in Grief podcast once again. And sorry, but Michaelene Dowers and I were already in a conversation, and I didn't even hit record. So here we are. I'm just going to start doing it like Joe Rogan, I think. You know, just you're entering into the conversation. So, but anyways, Michaelene Dowers is her name, and she is a thanatologist. And so that's a big word for people out there. Some of you don't know what that is. And she's a grief expert, a licensed funeral director, and embalmer in 7 states. She teaches funeral service at the associate's level and bachelor's level, and she's working on her PhD in mind-body medicine with a concentration on end-of-life care and trauma. So there's a lot there, and there's more to her, actually, too. But welcome, Michaelene. How are you?
I'm doing great. This lovely day. Just working things through with work and home and
good. Sounds good.
Life.
And you're located where?
I am currently located in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
For now, you travel around a little bit, don't you?
We move about every 2 to 3 years at this rate. It just happens.
Wow. More power to you.
Just moved this weekend.
Moving's not fun.
No, but I have it down to a T. We just unpacked everything. We've been here since Saturday, and the last box got done this morning.
Well, good. Well, welcome to Chattanooga, right?
Yes. Welcome to Chattanooga. It's wonderful so far.
Sounds good. Anyways, we got acquainted online somewhere, and you've got some great things going on. One of the main things I want to talk to you about is your site, Pollen.Care. Is that the full web address? Because that's what it says in the bar.
That is the full web address. If anybody wants to go to Pollen.Care, they can take a gander through my page, see what I'm about, and ask for help.
That's great. We're going to learn about it. Yeah. And so why don't you give me some background, learn about you, and what might have brought you to the things that you're doing with all of this.
So many, many moons ago, I was in high school, so this is quite a long time ago, and somebody made a comment saying, well, for your senior project, you have this glowing personality. Why don't you go help at a funeral home? They were taking a jab at me, and I said, you know what, maybe I will. And I did, and that's where I stayed. So about 20 years ago, Um,
Wow.
yeah, I worked my way up. Was an apprentice. I was an intern. I went to mortuary school. I learned the ins and outs of everything in California, where I'm originally from. And then I left. And then my husband and I moved uh, all around the country for the last 10 years. And as I was going, I got to learn about death care in urban settings, in rural settings, in super rural settings, like towns of 50 people, in, socioeconomic statuses of various types, the ultra rich as well as those who don't have anything and who need my help, as well as, different cultures, different religions, all sorts of things, different family dynamics that one normally wouldn't even think of come into play too. So with that being said, I took all this knowledge and I continued my education. I got a
Hmm.
bachelor's degree in religious studies. I got a master's degree focusing on emergency management. And then I got that master's in thanatology, which is where I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to leave the funeral home. I'm going to do more. So I taught.
What does thanatology mean for those out there that don't know?
Thanatology is the psychological and scientific study of death, dying, and bereavement. It's a lot of grief therapy practices, a lot of unpacking trauma resources and things that go on in people's lives that cause people to have grief and bereavement. And it's not necessarily always an actual physical death of a body, whether it be human or animal. Sometimes
Sure.
it's loss of items, tangible products that we have attachments to, events in our lives that really affect us. I mean, think about people who die who we don't personally know, who we see on the news, like Richard Simmons the other day. Uh,
Hmm. Yeah.
I was stricken with, a little bit of grief because, I mean, obviously I didn't know him, but I remember the 80s and the 90s, and I remember seeing him every week. And he was a staple of my childhood that was lost. And, he was old, so of course he was going to die eventually, but there's still grief there.
Yeah, he was an endearing figure, actually. I
Yeah,
mean, at first mocked a lot and everything, but
fun
he
guy.
took it all in stride,
Right. And he
and then
helped people.
he
So
did,
he helps so many
definitely.
people, and I love that. And I feel like that's our purpose here on Earth, is we're supposed to help those who need our help, regardless of.
Amen to that. I think that's excellent. I love that you talked about all those different aspects of the death care and the different areas. And I thought about our situation right away when Jeff passed. My ex-wife lives in South Dayton, New York. It's a little community, rural community, real small. And we went to the funeral home there. And as I was reading over your things, I was thinking all about that and how he handled everything with us and everything. And we were in shock. I mean, just total shock. And it was
Mhm.
such a blur, and here I am. It's like, what? I got to pick out a casket for my son. I mean, it just was bizarre. But I can see so much how it means, so much to the people that they don't even realize. And it's probably kind of thankless. I'm sure they get a lot of thank yous and things like that. But there's probably many people that come through that they put into practice what you've taught them or the kind of things that you're talking about. And then, it just goes on and the people just kind of disappear and they're gone or whatever. But I know that all I can say is that there was no hangups or problems in anything that happened with our situation. And that makes it a lot easier, of course,
Good.
so yeah, so you go around and do that in different places. Is that what you help people with?
Generally speaking, I teach remotely a lot of the time. So a lot of the people who need me, they'll call me or they'll send me an email and say, "Hey, I have this really interesting situation that I've never dealt with before." And they tell me about what's going on. And if I've experienced it, I can help them and say, "This is what I experienced and this is how I approached it." Or if I didn't experience it, I go through, the bereavement stuff. Okay, well, what did you learn in school? Tell me about the family. Tell me about the area you're in. I can help you from there. Is this somebody who's a local or somebody who might be of a different faith or background as your usual local people? Like if it's a very Catholic area and they happen to get a Hindu individual, the funeral director might need a little bit of help if they're not
Mm.
used to that. So that's what I do. I just help. They contact me. I give them assistance. When it comes to pollen specifically, families go onto my website. They enter the information in a type form sheet of questions that I ask them. That type form sheet comes to me. I look it over and I get back to them within 24 hours if I have any further questions. And then I go to my home library and I pull books. They're children's books. They're not for the parents. They're for the children, and the parents sit with them. So it's all
Hmm.
kids' books geared towards death, dying, bereavement. I can address different religions, different races, different dispositions. So whether it be cremation, burial, green burial, aquamation, even if I could find a book, I'm working on writing one on human composting right now, but geared towards children. And I curate these books in a packet. I wrap them up real nice. I stick them in a box and I send them off to families so that they can sit with a little guide sheet of these are the books you should read in this particular order. I even address the cause of death of the individual if the family is willing to share about information about the loved one who has died.
Hmm.
So I would send a kid's book about Alzheimer's or a kid's book about addiction or suicide, or, things like that,
Yeah.
accidents.
Before we go too far into this,
Mhm.
I want to just set it for everybody. There's a couple different things that Michaelene is involved in here, and the first one is we did the background with the death care and the funeral home situation, and she has a site that's called Quietus B, and we will have the link to that, of course. And that is for those in the death care field, right?
Yes,
And that's where they can get that kind of education and help with those particular things on there. Now we're moving into what's Pollen.Care, and pollen like in a bee pollen, and there's reasons why all that's in place, but you can read that on the site. We'll have that on there too. And we were talking off air, and I want you to share again about the story with your daughter and how this kind of all came to be in your mind.
absolutely. So my daughter's 5 years old, and probably about 8 to 12 months ago, her dad was on a business trip out of state, and we usually do bedtime with him, and we called him on the phone, and we were FaceTiming like we always do, and then his phone cut out. It just stopped working. He was in the city somewhere, and it stopped working. No big deal. And she looks at me and she goes, "Oh, I guess Dad's dead."
Whoa.
And I looked at her and
Whoa.
I go, "What? No, his phone stopped working. It's not a problem. He'll either call back in the next minute or two, or we'll talk to him tomorrow night." And she goes, "Well, his phone stopped working. His phone died. Dad's dead."
Mm.
So we had a
Wow.
talk. Just because a phone stops working is not the same thing as a person or an animal or a plant dying. Phones are not alive. Computers are not alive. Animals, people, plants, those are living beings. When they die, they cease to exist. We are not a religious household. We believe that it's going to be up to her to make her decisions in the future.
Hmm.
My husband and I are both raised in completely different faiths. So that is what it is. I know everybody's different. But based on our personal beliefs, we give her beliefs, we show her everything, and one day she'll make her own choices. And she said, "Oh, so that's it." And we said, "Yeah. Some people believe that when you die, you go somewhere called heaven if you've been good." And she's like, "Oh, okay." Remember, she's 5. I can't tell her too much or she'll
Hmm.
go off on another tangent. And she said, "Oh, okay." And she rolled over and went to bed. Then a couple weeks later, she was at grandma's house in a different state. She looks at grandma and goes, "Hey, grandma, where's Milo?" Milo's grandma's cat. Grandma's cat was very old. They had to take Milo to the vet to be put to sleep. And grandma told her, "Chloe, Milo died. He's not here anymore. We had to take him to the vet, and the doctor gave him a shot so that he can go to sleep and die without any pain." She goes, "Well, grandma, why didn't you just change his batteries?"
Oh, not realizing that Milo is a living being.
Correct. And she's starting to put two and two together, and we're having these conversations, but these are things that children are understanding younger and younger. They have technology. If you look at, all of the kids shows, we have Bluey, we have Sesame Street. All of these address hard topic situations like death. If you look at the Bluey episode, there was a bird episode where a bird died and they had a service for a bird. If you look at Sesame Street, it was Mr. Hooper, I think it was back in
Mm,
the 80s or 90s. He died and Big Bird had a hard time with it. And Sesame Street addressed that situation in a way that
yep.
was non-denominational and was suitable for all children. And I think that's wonderful. Children are not dumb. They see what's going on around them. They're picking up on what we say. And it's my firm belief that talking to a child about death doesn't need to happen when somebody dies. It needs to happen way before.
Yeah.
So when grandma gets sick with Alzheimer's, you need to have that talk about what it is. There's kids' books about that. When somebody goes into the hospital, or when somebody gets put on life support, or when somebody gets cancer, these are things that we need to talk to children about as soon as it happens, so that if something happens and they do die, heaven forbid, then we can absolutely have that further conversation because we've already had the basis. It's already been started. They're not afraid. And then we need to have the conversation so that we don't scare the child about what happens after death. We have to do something with the body. It's called disposition. What is that? Well, it's technically disposing of a body. We can't leave grandma at home. What does that mean for us?
Yeah, because then I want you to share the other story you were talking about, because I have a 5-year granddaughter, and or we do, and so my son passed away, and so Jeff's no longer here, and we said Jeff went to heaven, and then 2 of our dogs have died since then too, and she was close to them, and we just said they went to heaven, and I guess thinking about it, she didn't ask any questions, and so it's just left at that, and it's just hanging there, and we really don't know what's in her mind, so it's worth the investigation, I think.
Ask her.
And
absolutely.
It's easy for us because she didn't ask any questions, but no, we definitely got to get into it with her. She just goes on her merry way. Like you said, your daughter just rolled over and went to bed,
right?
And that's what they do. And but share the one about grandma in church, and to show how it can go further and in the kid's mind.
Before I get to grandma in church, I want to say, if you don't talk to your kids about death, they'll learn about it in school. And if they learn about it in school, it's just like sex ed. What are they learning? And I don't mean
really?
School from the teacher. I mean school from their peers.
Yeah.
Do you really want another 5, 6, or 7-year-old telling your kid about that topic, these tough topics that really should be personal and kept necessarily within the family, but at an educational level?
Right. That exactly.
But
They say what, like you said, they say just what they're going to say, and
exactly.
they speak. Yeah.
Exactly. And now your kid's going around with this idea of, things that maybe you didn't want them to know based on your personal beliefs.
Exactly.
Definitely address that early on. But on the concept of children going to a funeral, let's say grandma dies and the kid goes, well, where's grandma? I haven't seen grandma, and you don't address it. And you tell him grandma went to heaven. And he goes, oh, okay, cool. That's great. No problem, right? And then you take this child to church on Sunday and grandma's in a casket and she's up there at the front, and you go to church to see grandma, and then grandma disappears at the end. And then you've left church, and next week you go to church again because it's Sunday and grandma's not in the casket at church. Where's grandma? Did you not address it with the child? So now that child is going to be either afraid to go to church because grandma went to church and never came home, or the other side is that child's going to go to church and expect to see grandma every Sunday. And what this does is it creates a death anxiety in the child. The child is going to look for grandma or be afraid of church, and now they're never going to go to church again, which for those who are religious, that's not good. That's not what you want. But also, what if it's a funeral home situation? Now that child is afraid of the funeral home. And I had a situation where about 40, 50 years later, that child comes in, but he doesn't come in. He never comes in. We have his dead mother, and he lived with his mother, and he took care of his mother, and he loved his mother very, very much. And he could not bring himself to come into the funeral home. And I finally got a hold of him. He goes, I cannot come in. I refuse to come in. My mother is going to be a direct cremation. I would love to honor her, but I physically and emotionally cannot be in your building. I had a traumatizing experience 45 years back, and I can't do that. And what does that mean? That means myself or another funeral director has to take all of our documents and all of our paperwork and get in the car and go to this man's house that he shared with his mom for decades and took care of her, and sit down with him and make these really hard arrangements that they're going to be hard. They're always going to be hard for somebody you love. But they don't have to be this kind of hard. This is an unnatural, traumatic hard that should never have been. Because back in the day, Nobody addressed this with their children.
Yeah, and isn't he sitting there thinking in his own mind, why can't I do this? Why can't I be like everybody
Right.
else? And then he fails to have the kind of
Exactly.
closure, if you call it that, whatever it might be. But
But he has a
that other
fear.
step.
He has a fear
Yeah.
of death. He has a fear of the funeral home. My funeral home where I work is not a scary place. We have rooms, a lot of them have rooms where children can go play during the service if they want to. A lot of the funeral directors they're perfectly fine explaining at a child's level what's going on and saying, "Hey, do you know what happened? Do you want to see grandma? It's okay to touch her. She can't, nothing's going to hurt. She's okay. She's not in pain anymore." And the vast majority of the families I care for, their loved one who's died, they didn't die from something scary. They died because they either got really, really sick or an accident happened and it was quick.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're not in pain. They're not hurting anymore. They're not scared. If you're religious, they're with Jesus. This is only their physical shell of a body. Whatever the family believes, we can do that. We can take a kid on a tour of a lot of parts of the funeral home. Not every location, but a lot of times we can have that child involved depending on their age. And I've had services where I've had a little girl crying because they prepped her up until the funeral and now she realized we're going to put grandmother in the ground and I'm never going to see her again. She's a little girl, probably about 7. This is years ago. And I go, "I
Mm-hmm.
need to carry your grandma's casket. Do you want to hold my hand and help?" And she said, "Yes." And I go, "Okay, hold the
Hmm.
handle here." And this little girl held the handle of the casket right in front of me while I did all the heavy lifting of the casket. And I said, "Honey, you're going to walk behind and you're going to push it. We're going to push it down to the car." And she goes, "Okay, can I look in the car first?" And I go, "Yeah." And is there a time limit? No. Everybody there said, "Okay, let her do it." Because they recognized that that child needed to see in the car that I put a casket into about what goes on. And she asked every question she wanted to at that time. And that little girl, I'm assuming she went home and asked mom and dad more questions and wasn't afraid anymore. And then she went to
Mm-hmm.
the cemetery and got to visit grandma and got that explanation too.
That's excellent. And I read too on your site, I think you have some innovative ways of handling the death care situation for families and everything. And there's a lot of things happening now in funeral homes, things being done different ways and everything. So you do some of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. um, Cat. Um,
Yes.
but I have a lot of people that a lot of folks they have this traditional way of doing things. They say, I go, "Why are you doing this in a church or in a funeral home?" A lot of people aren't religious these days or aren't connected to a specific funeral home, and their answer is, "That's just what we've always done."
Yep.
Okay, so you're doing it because you have to or because you've always done it? And they say yes, and I go, "Does this heal you?" Well, no, grandma was a circus performer, and I would have really loved to have a service with her cremated remains present under the big top. Okay, why are we not doing this then? They're like, "Because this is what we've always done. We've
Yep.
always done this." And I go, "But if it doesn't heal you and it doesn't honor your grandmother, maybe we shouldn't be doing this anymore. Maybe we should
Hmm.
take this out to an event center under the big top." And this isn't going to devalue in any way your loved one's life. This isn't going to devalue the services that I can provide. I can do the same thing in my funeral home that I can do in a church, that I can do under a tent, that I can do in an event center, that I can do in an amusement park. It doesn't matter. I can still help you honor your loved one anywhere, obviously within the confines of the law, but I can do most
Mm-hmm.
anything. And one of the classes I teach is hospitality. And I teach my students how to go out there and to think outside of the box and help those families that extra step. We are a transient society and we have situations where the children are in New York and grandma's dead in Colorado, but the grandchildren are in California. So how do we put this together? How do we make this happen? How do we honor her? When you read an obituary, Tom, what do you see? You see that she was a great grandmother. She made cookies with her grandchildren. Did you know that she saved everybody from a house fire in 1956? Do you
Hmm.
know that she was a nurse in the Vietnam War? Or do you only know about her cookies?
Yeah.
Pay attention to these things.
So
Like,
then you use technology and things like that to bring everybody together
absolutely.
and those type of things.
We
Yeah.
have web hosting, we have live casting for those who can't make it. We have providers who are online cremation providers for those who choose cremation who might not be present. I worked for one of these companies when I was in Indiana quite a while back. That was it perfect? No, but I could have a family in one state with a deceased individual in another and family in another, and they said we're just going to take the cremated remains and do it ourselves. And I'd say, let me guide you in providing a service that maybe I can't do it because I'm in Indiana, but you can do it on your own and it doesn't have to be tomorrow. Let me help you.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm. Yeah. Wow. I remember, I think it might have been my grandmother's. Now she was 97,
wow,
and it wasn't going to work in a situation like with my son where everybody was so upset
right.
and it was so intense. Because I thought about it afterwards and I was like, I really like the approach. What we did with I believe it was my grandmother or someone that I remember that was elderly, but we all sat around actually in the room where the wake was done and everything. And we put chairs around in a circle and we all just started sharing stories about the person
Absolutely.
and laughing, and having a good time and, laughing about all the things and just another way of doing things. I really thought it was refreshing, to honor the person that way, and share those things, and it helped the people in the funeral home too. So
Well,
yeah,
think
that was
about the
great.
guests that were there who might not have known every aspect of his life. I mean, it adults, nobody knows every aspect of my life. My family here at home is different than my work people, is different than friends in Indiana, California, colleagues across the US and the world. I mean, they know snippets of me. I've been married for 10 years. My husband knows the 12-year version of me. He doesn't know child me. My best friend
Hmm.
from third grade, she knows a different me. So why would we not get these groups together to talk about me if I were dead? Just to share, heal everybody.
Yeah, good celebration of life. Yep,
Absolutely.
yep.
That's what it's about.
I want to ask you about Pollen.Care and Pollen.Care. Remember everybody? So, but do you have an age limit on that as far as the children go, or do you focus more on, one realm or?
Right now, I'm working on birth to 18. The main focus is that category of age like 5 to probably 12. I do have a teen set up as well. One thing I am working on heavily right now is actually a branch off for men and women who have experienced the loss of a stillborn or a miscarriage. And my husband wants me to start working on a set for men specifically who might have lost a child. He shared a story from somebody that he knows from a group that said, everybody asked my ex-wife how she's doing after the loss of our child. And they ask her all the time, and it's been 8 years. And he goes, and the gentleman said, nobody asked me anymore. I'm still suffering. I'm still hurting just like she is.
Hmm.
But nobody asked me because I'm a man and they think, I'm robust and I can handle it. Where they'll ask her every other week, every time she comes across a new person who's aware of their situation, they ask her, but not him.
Yeah.
So it's in the mix. But right now, I'm focusing on that 0 to 18 with a hyper focus and 5 to 12.
Mm, wonderful. There's a lot to chomp on here. There's a lot. And yeah, I love I mean, the podcast here, I had the vision that it was going to be all people who suffered some great grief and then did something with it. But if you think about, the Heroes in Grief name, you're in grief in a different way and covering some aspects that people definitely need to have be surrounded by. That really helps. So I like that it's having a life of its own pretty much.
It's doing its
So
own thing
that's
out there.
yeah, yeah. What else has been going on? You talked about the possibility of a book.
Hmm. Yes.
And any other ideas of things that you might want to do or branch off with what you're doing now?
I keep getting pulled in so many different directions. I do a lot of consulting. I have spoken to people all around the world. I am very interested in green burial. This is something that I have friends that are more interested in it than I am, that we're talking, we're collaborating, we're getting together, just going out for coffee. Home death care is something that is, I hate to call it new and improved and the new thing, but because go back 100, 150 years, that's what we did. We took care of our
Yeah.
dead at home. I'm working with companies who have items that they want to market to people, death doulas, death companions, funeral homes, pet funeral cremation centers who participate in putting animals down with their families present, just to give them that little extra care and comfort. So I'm always working on something, and it's from the standpoint of if I can ease people's suffering, I will. If I can create a positive spin on a horrible situation, I will. If we can learn from what's going on, we should. Death doesn't always have to be horrible.
Right. With the way, I mean, you studied this, you became a funeral director and things. Is it taught? Is bereavement taught in it, or it may be now, maybe,
Very
or
lightly.
yeah? I
Very
was
weird.
wondering how they're reacting. I mean, they could be like, "Oh my gosh, where have you been?" And thank you so much for this because I didn't know how to handle this or whatever.
Well,
What do you find out there? What's the
in the associate's degree program for every college that teaches mortuary science, we're governed by a specific accrediting committee that tells us what we have to teach, which is fine, and it's working out wonderfully. Once you get onto the bachelor's degree, there's more. So there's light bereavement, but I cannot cover every topic in a 12-week class. That's not going to happen. So some
right?
schools are branching out, but you have to go a little bit deeper. That's where there's the master's in Thanatology program, which is not suitable for everybody. Those who want to focus on the science aspect, like embalming, they're not going to take that stuff. They're going to go more chemistry, more biology. But those who want to go more deeper into helping people on the mental standpoint, they'll go down that master's degree route. They'll take classes, not from me because I don't have my PhD yet, but they'll take classes at the schools I've been to teach death and bereavement on that deeper level. When I was taking my master's in thanatology, I actually focused my thesis on psychedelics and end of
Hmm.
life. So
Well,
it was really interesting to learn how fear of the unknown really affects people. I mean, sitting there thinking about what happens if you only have 6 months left to live. Standing back, you're like, yeah, I think I could handle it, but can you? If somebody looked at you today, Tom, and said, you have 6 months or less on this earth, could you cope? Would you be scared?
better now. Well,
Okay,
yeah, of course. There's humanness, and that's you're going to be scared. There's no way around that.
right.
I've been trying to cope better since Jeff passed
Hmm.
with meditation and my belief of the afterlife and those things. So that's
Absolutely.
helped immensely. I'm less scared of death now. Maybe not scared of death now. When I was a pastor, actually for 15 years, I was scared of death, even still. So big differences. But no, I've actually thought about that because, being in the grief circles now all the time and everything, you think about those kind of things.
Mhm.
And yeah, I've always thought, oh my gosh, what if that happened? Where would my brain be? And I worked ambulance for 15 years, and I remember taking a guy. This sticks in my mind. There's the thing called the Skyway in Buffalo, and it goes over the city. Kind of, it's a highway that goes over the city, and it looks out over Lake Erie and everything. And so it's a well-known area and
Mhm.
place. And I'm thinking we were taking this guy to hospice, to die, basically. And he's sitting up in the back of the ambulance looking out of the back of the window. And I was thinking, he's lived here his whole life. He's thinking this last trip and what he's looking at, and all that crossed my mind for those kind of things. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff I thought about when I was thinking someone told me, and I look around and, in a day when I'm doing things or whatever, and, what am I going to absorb as my thinking in my life at that point, and death for that matter.
There's so many people out there who never do that because they might not be in the medical field or they might not be in a religious field for employment or they've never had the unfortunate experience of a family member dying. I believe the statistics say, and this is just off the top of my head, that the average American deals with two deaths closely to them that they've had to arrange for their whole lives.
Hmm.
One of them is a spouse, and one of them is a parent. That's it. Two.
Yeah, I'm way over the limit.
That's horrible, and I'm sorry you had to be in that group.
Thank you.
But your average American has only dealt with it by the time they die twice, and they're not experts. You're not an expert, and I mean you might be now, but walking into a funeral home, let me tell you, I have dealt with my own family's deaths, and something happens when you get the phone call that tells you that somebody has died. And even doing what I do for a living, I couldn't do it. I got called when I was on my way home from work once from somebody who's a friend of my biological father's wife saying, "You need to call me back. Something happened." I called and they told me what happened. And I go, "Okay, I need to call you back." And I hung up on her. And I just sat there and I was absolutely, I had no clue what to do. I do this every day. This is what I've been doing for years. And every ounce of knowledge I had on this topic, gone. What do you do?
Mm-hmm. It's different.
It's very different.
The emotions and humanness in that is different than work.
Absolutely. Some can go
and
on
knowledge.
autopilot for it.
Yeah.
I think if it's expected, you can go on autopilot for it and do the job easily. Well, not easily, but better than a surprise phone call, which is what I got, totally unexpected. But you do what you have to, and then you go, okay, you regroup, you figure it out, and then you call who you need to call, trusted friends, and say, "I need help with this. This is what's going on. Help me." And they get it done. I have funeral directors everywhere.
The initial, that early, very early stage grief, the initial grief is overwhelming. There's
Yeah,
nothing mattered in my background when
right.
Jeff died. I mean, nothing. There, I couldn't even muster the the thinking to get there, much less have it penetrate.
You don't know who
It's
to
yeah,
call. You don't know what to do. Like, what is the next step? I don't know. Like,
yeah,
you sit there.
yeah.
You kind of just sit there for a while and kind of, I don't know. That's all I
Zombified.
did. You
There's
drink a
nothing really
sip
to
of
say
water
because
and,
you're
yeah,
kind of
like, what do you think?
blank.
Like, you drink a sip of water and you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to cry a lot and deal with some things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then you go
Yep.
through all the motions of doing all the things, and then the end comes and your loved one is either cremated or buried, and then it's done, and you might not even remember the middle. You might not
Mm-hmm.
remember the whole process. Some do, some don't. Or it'll come back weeks to months later and you'll be like, "Hey, I remember that happening now. Oh my gosh."
Yeah.
Grief is a very bizarre thing.
No doubt. No doubt. I analyze it all the time. It's very, very, very strange. It's science fiction, really.
Hmm.
Um, do the funeral directors and people that do any of them like carry on a little longer term with people? Is that more on a personal level, like where they might know them or something, or any of them offer services that might go longer or something?
Depends on where you're at. I see that common in a lot of small rural locations. I used to live in Wisconsin. We had a location that was very small, very middle of nowhere. And man, this one will make me cry. I had a family I served and I met them and I sat down at the table and we were just getting ready to move to Minnesota. So it was like my very last client that I was going to take before I left within a few. And I wrote the obituary and it said she died with her best friend Missy by her side. I go,
Hmm.
who is Missy? I go, is that like her lover? Like, I don't know. And they're like, no, that's her dog. And I said, okay.
Yeah.
And they go, do you know anybody that wants a dog? And I go, no, I'm getting ready to move. I don't want a dog. And they're like, well, nobody wants her. I go, why? And they go, well, she's a beagle and we can't take her. We already have 5 dogs. Well, I have a beagle.
Somehow I knew that.
And I said, okay, well, I'm getting ready to move out of state. I can't take her right now. Let me talk to my husband. Let the dogs meet. I said, okay. And I got to know the family and the dogs met. And that fat old beagle came up on my lap, sat on my lap, licked my face, licked my dog's face, and I had two beagles sitting on my lap. And I looked at the owner's daughter, and she goes, "That dog doesn't even sit on our laps. I think you just
Mm.
got yourself a dog." And I go, "Well, I cannot take her for another month. I have to finish moving all of my stuff to another state. I don't want to bring the dog into here and then route her a different way within a week." And they said, "Understandable." And I said, "Look, let me, you know, give me a couple weeks. Let me get settled in the other state. I have a couple weeks of work left. Once the house is set up, I'll come get her and we'll drive 4.5 hours across the state of Wisconsin with a dog." And she said, "Okay." And I go, "I will text you the night before we leave." She said, "Okay." So I texted her. I texted her a couple weeks earlier, go, "How are things going with Missy? Is she doing okay? Do you still want me to take her we're prepping?" And she goes, "I think we're going to keep her. We love
Oh
our
my
mom's dog." And I go,
gosh.
"Okay." I go, "That's great. I want you to keep your mom's dog. She's your mom's dog. That's the last connection to your mom." It was the dog that the woman got when her husband had died 10 years earlier.
Mm. Wow, what a
And
connection.
if you know anything about beagles, beagles disappear easily. You leave a door open, they're gone.
Right.
The woman had died at home. Nobody was with her. It wasn't an accident. She was just an old woman, very sweet old lady. Her kids checked on her every couple days, and then they didn't hear from her. So they went to check on her and found her dead. The gate was open, the door was open. The dog did not leave the house.
Hmm.
What kind of beagle is
Well,
this? Right. But they came in and
yeah.
the dog was laying next to her owner. And, you know, they said they're going to keep her. And I go, "That's wonderful. I don't want a second beagle anyway." One was fine. They're nuts, you know? So I go, "Okay." I go, "Well, you change your mind. This is the day I leave." I go, if I'm in the car that morning and that dog is not in my car, you keep her." And they said, "Okay." She texted me the night before and said, "Can you come get the dog tomorrow morning on your way out of town? We've decided you can take her. She loves you. She would be so happy with a friend." Okay.
Mm.
Showed up the next morning. There were tears. There were crying. We left. The darn dog tried to die on us 2 months later. She got this disease. $8,000 later, the dog's alive. She lives another
Mm.
2.5 to 3 years. So I didn't know that first time around that I was already pregnant with my daughter. So I'm sitting there in an urgent veterinarian office, not knowing I'm pregnant, throwing up everywhere, watching this dog practically die. I'm crying. I go, "We just got this dog a month ago. We can't let it die. Like, they would think I killed their dog."
Oh, yeah.
So we bring the dog back to life. She's fine for years. Now she's a 16-year-old beagle, old, decrepit, on medication, fat. And she has an episode again. They bring her back. She lives another 6 months. And we had just sold two houses during COVID. So we had quite a bit of money in the bank after that. When the housing market boomed and everything, and everybody could sell their
Yeah.
house for way more than it's worth. And I looked at the veterinarian, and I didn't grow up with money at all. And I looked at him and I go, "Save my dog." And he goes, "I can't." And I go, "Here's my checkbook. I just sold two houses. What do you need?" And the lesson, it's a hard lesson. He goes, "I can see that you grew up without anything. And I can see how much you love this dog, but she's sick and she's going to die. And if I bring her back now, you are going to be in every week. You're going to be in here every week, bringing her back, and it's not fair to her. It's not fair to you or your toddler or your husband or the other dog." He goes, "You need to let her go." He goes, "No amount of money you give me today," it was a lot of money, "is going to fix this forever. She will die. We will all die." So we put her to sleep. But in that 3 years, I had this family, this other family. When I'm at the vet's office getting ready to put the dog down, I called the daughter of the woman who died. And she picked up the phone and I go, "Hey." And she goes, "Hey." Oh no. She's like,
Mm.
"Hold on." And
Yeah.
her husband pulled the car over. And they're in Wisconsin, I'm in Seattle. at the time because I had moved again. And we're, across the country from each other, across time zones, and we're bawling our eyeballs out over her mom's dog, who I just had for like 3.5 years, who I brought back from the brink of death multiple times. And it was time. And we still exchange Christmas cards with them every year. The dog's been gone now for 2 years. We still have our other beagle, and they send us Christmas cards. We send them Christmas cards. They love seeing my daughter. They love seeing her. Um, Almost every funeral director out there has something, probably not that exact story, but something close to it, where a family just bonds with them
Mm-hmm.
every time. And families give gifts every so often, not every family, and we're not supposed to accept gifts. But if it's something special that they're giving you, even if just a thank you card, there in my desk over there, there's a box of thank you cards that families have sent me. It's not a ton of them, but it's just the thank you cards. And when I'm feeling really crummy about myself or like I don't make a difference, I go and look at those. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, look at the people. Look at
Oh,
how many people are out there that I was able to help heal. So we funeral directors, everybody has it, that little stash of stuff, you know, the
yeah.
families that connect to us, that still talk to us years later. Somebody else dies in the family and they come to us. You get established as a funeral home with a church who you do one great service and they come back to you multiple. That church will say, you need to go to this funeral home. They will take care of you and love you like you are one of
Mm-hmm.
theirs.
How rewarding.
It is.
That is a big fat yes to my question. But I thank you for sharing that. That was, and thank you for your emotion, because I think there's a feeling out there that, like the lurch mortician, that there's no feeling and no sentiment and all these things.
I
And
hate
people need to understand and realize you're real people. You're just normal people like everybody else. And so uh, I really appreciate you sharing that
Thank you.
sentiment.
The vast majority of us, I'd say like 90 to 95% of funeral directors, we just want to help. We're not out there to
Yeah.
make a buck. I mean, if I wanted to go make millions, it would not be in this. Trust me. I don't make millions. That's the thing. I make enough to survive like we all do. And this is not the industry where you go in to make a buck at all. I
Uh,
mean, are there, firms out there that exist that make a lot of money? Yes. There's big firms
mhm.
out there, who's making it. It's not me. It's not the funeral director. It's the owners. It's the corporations. It's people in charge, way, way above me. Um,
Mhm.
no matter how much I have, it's, you know, somebody else is making the money. And, sales, if you go in a pre-arrangement status, they'll make money. They're not going to make usually millions of dollars. They'll make enough to survive in the area they're in. And we
Yeah.
do it because we love helping. I know I keep saying that, but
No, that's
that's
great.
what it is.
I don't think people have that. I mean, I don't know. I didn't have that impression of morticians, not necessarily, so I think it may be, I don't know. I may have encountered it somewhere out there if that was the case, but I don't know. But another thing that I want to say is that I think there's a spiritual aspect to animals. And so I believe all of that, that uniting of all of you and everything. I think there's something woven in there.
There
And
has to be.
yeah, I believe that. And especially how endearing they are for us. I know oh my gosh, I love dogs and I loved every one of my dogs. But I believe that they're going to be there. So I'll see them again.
You know,
You know,
yeah. I tell people if I die, I better go where they go. I
yeah.
don't know where they go. I don't have any proof, but I want to go where they go if that's an option. I want to be with them. Also, and this is something I told people at work, not a lot of people, but I said, when I die, if I get the opportunity to come across the people I've helped, the families I've served in the last decade or more, and I get to see them and ask them, did I help? If I can meet them again and they say, yeah, you helped me pass on comfortably, or you helped me come back to my family, or my family remembers me, my family visits me. I get to visit them if that's something that is real. Like, how cool would that be?
Oh, yeah. And you'll know it. You won't even have to ask it. I was thinking of a meditation that this guy, Michael Recchia, I think it is, and he does guided meditations. And part of his meditation is, okay, picture yourself, you're going into this beautiful meadow and field, and all of your animals that you've had in your life are with you, and I just picture that going across the field with all my dogs, and that's special stuff.
That's what I want.
Oh, Michaelene, we could talk for a while. It's almost an hour.
Has it? Oh my gosh,
Excellent.
It has been.
It's so cool. So yeah, folks, there's a lot here to chomp on. And so those in the industry, Michaelene does work with the industry for end-of-life care, death care. And so that is a site that will be listed in the show notes, and it's called Quietus, B-E-E. And I'm not going to go through spelling it. You can look it up, .com, and the link will be there. And then the other aspect of what she's doing right now is helping with children and giving opportunities for you to share your story about the child that you're dealing with, and on the site, right? They put this in there, the information, and then she provides resources to help you help this child understand things. And so that is great.
My ultimate goal, Tom, is to have resources out there, not just for the public to purchase from me, but to have it in every church, every addiction center for people who have drug addiction or alcoholism, because those children who have family with that issue need help too. Rehab centers for people who are suffering from, injuries, for hospice facilities, hospitals, funeral homes need these, just little children's libraries set for the types of care that the children are going to be experiencing through their loved ones that are receiving.
Mm-hmm. So needed, and you will have endless work.
I hope so.
Absolutely.
I hate that I have to have that endless work, but I would gladly do it just to help everybody.
Well, people are going to keep dying.
I can't hear that. No.
Right. And so you're never going to run out of things to work for. That's right. For sure. And that site for the children, as we were talking about, was for the child situation is Pollen.Care, and that'll be in the notes as well. Michaelene, thank you so much for coming on. It's great to get acquainted with you and all the things that you're doing. I love, having resources in different areas, and I can certainly throw this, we'll get this out there to people when they, address those kind of things. So, thank you. And
thank you for having me.
For the work you're doing and your heart toward it, because, that's why we're all doing what we're doing at this point, I think, in this field anyways. And I feel the same way. Just want to help people. And that's what the stories are for. So
thank you for having me.
Is there anything that maybe we didn't cover or something that you just want to get out to folks that maybe has been on your heart lately?
Just talk to your kids. I don't care how old they are. Just talk to them about death. Talk to them about dying. Talk to them about sickness, accidents. They're not, children understand at their own level. They see what you're saying. They see what you're doing. They're hiding behind the corner, watching, wondering. Just pay attention to them and help them throughout this journey, because death is a part of life. And the sooner we get acquainted with it and the sooner they become familiar with it in a healthy way, the better the outcome is many, many years down the road.
Excellent advice. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, Michaelene. And thank you, everybody, for listening today. And I hope that you got as much out of this as I did, because it touched my heart for sure. I think that people can look at maybe the subject matter or something and say, oh, I don't want to touch that. But they're going to miss out on a big heart in Michaelene right here and her stories and what she's doing. So keep up the great work, and I'm sure we'll touch base soon. Thanks, Michaelene.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes in Grief podcast. If you'd like access to any of the links that we discussed in today's show, you can find them in the show notes. There's also a link there to support the podcast if you care to. And there is an email link for me there. I'd love to hear from you and your ideas about the show or what you thought about the show. You really can help out this podcast to get to more people if you subscribe, rate, or review it in whichever way your platform provides. Each week, Heroes in Grief is released on Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Time, so look for new episodes there. Thank you again for listening to Heroes in Grief.